Hello, everyone. This is Caleb with King's Advisors. And today we have a very interesting topic, a very cool legal topic. Now, we love the law. We're lawyers. Of course, we love it. We love it even more when it gets used for its actual purpose as a sword for justice and not a shield for the powerful. And it would appear that we have a case of just that here. So, I've not watched a lot of UFC in my life. I wouldn't say I dislike it. It's just I'm not really a fan. And it's probably more that I don't want to pay to watch fights. And I already watch so much other stuff between sports, television, movies, and YouTube and all that kind of stuff that I just don't have the time to watch fights. But I'm aware of its popularity and have watched highlights and some fights when interested or invited over to do so. So I have a small understanding of that world. So this is where the interesting story is. Dana White and the UFC are heading to court. Years ago, back in 2015, before the gorilla got shot, before everything went haywire, a bunch of former fighters got together and filed an antitrust lawsuit against White and the UFC, saying that they had too much power over what the fighters were being paid. And finally, after years of the different sides filing brief after brief, and then the judge taking months and sometimes even over a year to come up with a decision, the United States District Court for Nevada finally certified the class. Now, let me explain what this means, because this is a big deal. A class action lawsuit is a suit where one or more people sue an organization claiming they represent a class of people. For instance, the Marine Corps was recently sued for stuff that went on at Camp Lejeune. And the class of people was any Marine that served at Camp Lejeune during a certain period of time. Another example would be the Agent Orange stuff that happened in Vietnam. The class of people for that lawsuit was, I believe, anyone that served in Vietnam. So the question here is, what's the class? And how wide can this class be? Is this going to cover every single fighter that's ever fought in the UFC? So let's get into that. In this case, the class consists of fighters who, quote, competed in one or more live professional UFC promoted bouts taking place or broadcast in the United States from December 16th, 2010 to June 30th, 2017. Now, that comes from the lawsuit itself. I've pulled up the lawsuit here. This is from Case Text. They are a legal research company. So here we have the class definitions. So the plaintiffs were seeking two different classes to certify. They were seeking the bout class, which is what I just talked about. All persons who competed in one or more live professional UFC promoted MMA bouts taking place or broadcast in the United States from December 16th, 2010 to June 30th, 2017. And the bout class excludes all persons who are not residents or citizens of the United States unless, and this is kind of a big thing here, unless the UFC paid such persons for competing in a bout fought in the United States. Now, the plaintiffs also tried to get this second class certified, the identity class. And that was each and every UFC fighter whose identity was exploited by the UFC, including in UFC licensed merchandise and or UFC promotional materials in the United States from December 16th, 2010 to June 30th, 2017. Now, the second class did not get certified, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. So this means that all of the about 1,200 fighters that fit the description in the bout class, that fit this description, are now part of this class. Now, the next step for the class will be to basically publish. So what happens when these kind of things happen is the representatives get the class certified, and then they basically call up all the people who fit that description and say, do you want to opt in or opt out? In some states, you are automatically opted in. In South Carolina, you are automatically a member of the class. You have to opt out. That's why whenever I get the email saying from like Facebook or Google that say, hey, you are a member of this class, don't forget to opt in or opt out, I don't have to do anything because I'm automatically a member of the class. So what they'll do over probably the course of the next year, it's probably going to take a while because this kind of stuff has to take a while. 1,200 people isn't that much for a class action, but it's still going to take a while to do. And so they have to contact all the members and basically say, do you want to opt in or opt out of the class? If you opt in, you're done. You just opt in and the class reps take care of everything. As a class member, you just share in the rewards. So let's look at this identity class. Let's look at why it did not get certified. So the reasoning behind everything the judge says is actually much lower in this document. So let me scroll down and get there. You can see that it is a very long document.
One eternity later.
So you may ask why it took so long for the court to certify the class. And it's mostly because this is a very complicated thing. What they're basically arguing is that Zuffa and the UFC engaged in business practices that would manipulate how much money each fighter would get. And in order to show that, there's a lot of math you have to do, and there's a lot of proof and calculations, and you have to take data from in-house sources that at Zuffa. You have to take data from different events, and it's a lot of data to sort through. And so that's why this kind of stuff takes so long, because the experts that lawyers, plaintiffs, and defendants use to prove their cases, they spend a lot of time on this stuff. I've been involved in one class action in my life, and the binders that our experts came in with, I mean, they'd come in with like 3 or 4 of those 2-inch binders full of their calculations. And it was just maddening sitting there listening to them try to explain these numbers and the correlations between the data and how that proves certain stuff, which is why most of these cases usually end up on a bench trial. They usually end up being decided by a singular judge, because you couldn't expect laymen, normal jurors, a normal person, to be able to comprehend this type of stuff. So now that we finally got to the section on the identity class, let me try to explain what all of this means. So they claim that the members, and it's technically 2 classes in this class. They break this up into 2 subparts. Right here. So the first subgroup consists of fighters who, according to Zuffa's record, received at least some sponsorship payments, video game, merchandise, royalty, yada, yada, yada. The second group consists of all fighters who executed a par agreement during the class period. My understanding is par agreement is just the contract that a fighter signs to fight. Dr. Singer, who was their expert, apparently was unable to prove a common question in these subclasses. And what that means is he was unable to prove that the members of this second class suffered common injury. There was too much disparity, and some people got paid stuff, some people didn't get paid stuff. So that kind of plays into why this did not get certified. But the bigger class, the fighter class, did get certified. So all of these fighters are covered. So it was almost, my opinion is that this second class shouldn't have even been argued, because it could be seen as double dipping. Now, some people may ask why this is a big deal. The first reason is, from what I understand from articles that I've read, stories I've heard, and conversations with UFC mega fans, Dana White hates court and has done a very good job of both keeping the UFC out of court and keeping the times that they are in court out of the press. I only heard of this because I was looking for something to make a video on, and I honestly thought this was really interesting. And anytime the courts certify a class, it's a really cool thing. And I really like reading their decision of how they got there. I don't always understand it. Like, I don't understand the math they use in this because it's beyond me. I went to law school, not math school. Now, you may also ask, what's the next step? Well, let me attempt to answer that. So I don't do class actions. I'm not a corporations guy. I'm currently practicing family law. And in a normal lawsuit, what happens is the plaintiff files the lawsuit, they file a summons and a complaint, and the defendant then answers that complaint with an answer and counterclaim. And then discovery occurs. And in discovery, you find out, let's say, about 80% of your case. You really learn a lot. And from there, you have to figure out if your case will survive any motions made by the other side, or if your claims are even legit. As lawyers, we have rules that require us to have a good faith reason for filing a lawsuit. That good faith reason can usually be the person coming in and saying, this is what happened to me. I want to file a lawsuit. But if in discovery, we receive the video camera evidence that shows, oh, he did it to himself, then we have to drop the suit because obviously it's not legitimate. In this case, though, a lot of discovery has already occurred because a lot of the proof to certifying a class comes out of the other side. They have to get evidence from the UFC and from Zuffa so that they can prove that they have this common injury among their people. Beyond that, I'm not sure what the next step is here. It may be some sort of settlement. Honestly, in my opinion, I think the smarter place to go would be to go to a settlement, get as much money as you can right now and try to force that into including some sort of competitive salary for fighters down the road. Rome wasn't built in a day, and I think if there really is a huge disparity in payment here, we know that these big name fighters like Conor McGregor, they get paid millions of dollars in their fight because they're able to use the draw that they bring to force a bigger slice of the pie. But then you have other fighters like Francis Ngannou. I hope I said his name right. If I didn't, I apologize. But you have other fighters like him who he's basically been forced out of the ring because you have other fighters like him who are basically forced to either take a very small cut of the pie or just give up altogether. And then, there's the whole story about, well, they don't provide healthcare benefits for these fighters. So and we already know how expensive healthcare is. So even if you get a huge pay, well, first off, let's say you get $100,000 for a fight. Okay. Well, 20% of that's already gone. Actually, probably 32% of that's already gone with taxes. Okay. Then your manager gets 15%. Your agent gets 5%. Then, you've probably got bills you have to pay. So eventually you end up with probably like 10 grand. We all know how far 10 grand goes today, especially if in a sport where, these things aren't happening every weekend. These things aren't happening every day. So it's not like some of these other sports where, you get a nice paycheck every day or every weekend because you've, placed 10th in the golf tournament or something like that. I will definitely be really interested to see where this goes. I will definitely be following this case. Like I said earlier, it's probably going to be, months, maybe even a year in the future before we really hear anything else that comes out of this. But it's going to be interesting, and I think it's going to change the landscape of the UFC. If you've made it this far, thank you so much. Please, drop that like, click the subscribe button, click the bell so you get notified, and follow us on Twitter at @KingSAdvisors_.